All right, we are now 8 months into the relentless war in Ukraine, and there's now been an increasing buzz that India could potentially play a key role as a mediator between Russia and the West. Now, for months now, many in the West, including the United States, had criticized India's position on the Ukraine war. But now India is, of course, being looked at as a possible mediator in the Ukraine war, precisely because of the strategic autonomy that India has exercised in terms of how it has dealt with the West and also in terms of the relations that it has maintained with Russia. Now, to help us understand how the United States, of course, has seen India's position and in terms of how all of these issues can, of course, be resolved, we are being joined by a very special guest, former Ambassador of the United States to India, Tim Roemer, who's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Now, Ambassador Roemer is a trusted consensus builder, a problem solver, and also an international affairs expert. In 2009, he was appointed the U.S. Ambassador to India, one of America's largest diplomatic missions, and it was during his time in office that Ambassador Roemer had helped move India from being America's 25th largest trading partner to the 12th. Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us here in WION. Now, the first question that I want to ask you is this. You know, right from the outset of the war, there was a lot of criticism, especially that was leveled by the West and also by the United States, that India was not picking a side, that India was not categorically, in some ways, condemning Russia's war in Ukraine. But now, the consensus, it appears, is that the West is increasingly looking at India to play the role of a mediator. How do you view this, sir?
We are going to have some disagreements with India. India lives in a very different part of the world than the United States does. China perched on its border, coming across its border. China terrorizing Taiwan with military drills and weaponizing the South China Sea. Russia very close to India. Afghanistan very close, both ethnically and religiously to India, but borders at times on a failed state. India has very different strategic interests and will come at the world differently than we will at times. We need to understand that, especially when they take place on such high level and sensitive issues as the Ukraine war. Now, despite India's 2 abstentions in the UN, I know that India is buying a lot of inexpensive oil from Russia. We're still positive, working with India, that India may be able to serve as some kind of interlocutor to this Ukraine war. We know India has always forcefully and articulately spoken out for other countries' territorial rights and their sovereign rights, and should never be invaded by another country. India has always stood firmly by these principles. Prime Minister Modi recently publicly criticized Mr. Putin in an open meeting for the conduct of that war. I understand Mr. Lavrov has heard from the Indian high-level government people about their concerns about the way Russia is conducting itself in this war. So I think there is the potential for Mr. Modi and India to serve as a peaceful and productive interlocutor at the right time in the right way.
Very interesting there. And also, considering the fact that the United States is virtually on the eve of the crucial midterm elections, so I want to ask you something very interesting that's in fact now been said by the chief of Russia's Wagner Group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, where he's now put out, almost brazenly that Russia has interfered in the US elections in the past, and he's also now gone on to state that it will continue to do so in the future. Now, Yevgeny Prigozhin is an individual who's been sanctioned by the United States of America, and this is something that he's now blatantly stating it pretty much for everyone to know. So I want to ask you this: how does the United States respond to this?
Well, I served on the Intelligence Committee when I served in our United States Congress for 6 elections. And we're not surprised that India and the United States agree on the values of democracy, but that there are countries out there like China and Russia and Iran and North Korea that attempt to negatively influence and polarize elections around the world, not just in the United States, but in many other countries. There are, as you know, difficulties today with misinformation getting polluted into our social media platforms. Countries like Russia trying to divide Americans and pose as trolls and create troll farms on social media sites. We also know that our technology companies in the United States have to do a better job of making sure that this misinformation is taken down right away when they are lies, whether they're propagated by the Russians or they're propagated by Americans that think that the 2020 election was somehow stolen. We know that's false. We know that's not right. We know that's misinformation to try to further divide Americans as we come up to our critical midterm elections tomorrow.
Absolutely, indeed. That's an election, sir, that we are tracking pretty closely here and beyond. But, Ambassador, you know, something that a lot of people are asking questions within India is about the US-India relationship. The fact is, ever since Joe Biden has become the president, since January 2021, there has been no appointment of an ambassador, an American ambassador to India. Why do you think that is? Because in the last 75-year history, ever since India has been independent, we've always had an American ambassador. But this time round, an American ambassador in New Delhi is not present. What do you think is the reason behind this?
Well, first of all, this is probably the most important relationship in the world today between the United States and India. It is one where having an ambassador there continues to deepen and broaden our already shared strategic convergence, our values, our belief in democracy, and our bilateral relationship. All kinds of things are going in a positive way in the relationship. This failure for the United States Senate to confirm our ambassador, who has been nominated by President Biden, Mayor Eric Garcetti, borders on, diplomatic negligence. We have to have an ambassador, a high-level, respected ambassador in India. And I'm hopeful that it's going to happen in the next month in the lame duck session of Congress, right after the midterm elections. I'm hopeful that Mayor Garcetti will have the votes and get a vote called up. And I'm hopeful that by early January, the new ambassador will be there.
All right, interesting. By January, early January, you say we could have an American ambassador in India. But Ambassador, there is another issue which a lot of Indians would, of course, want to, pick bones with. The fact is that for Indians to, in fact, apply for a visa, the waiting time is being said to be well over 800 days. This is baffling. This many people who turn around and say is something which is just simply, it's so wrong that they have to wait for 800 days to even get an appointment for a visa interview. Is there something that the United States government would like to do to, in fact, address this?
Well, this is one of the key issues that bring the United States and India together in such a unique and important and universal way. We have now an Indian-American diaspora in the United States that has a plethora of Indian Americans running U.S. companies, some of our major U.S. companies, more Indian Americans running for office in the United States and winning and serving in our national legislature and our state legislature. The ties between our families and our communities in the United States and India are like no other countries in the world. So this is a bridge between our two countries that we have to maintain, that we have to keep up. And the visa issue is one of the key issues to do this, that 800 days is too many. I know both our countries continue to look at national security, to look at processing these visas more quickly and expeditiously and fairly, and to try to make sure that the business community, that our economies have a win-win scenario from this relationship. Right. So I'm hopeful that with a U.S. ambassador in place, again, I'm optimistic that could take place soon.
Right.
And then this issue can be more formally and more forcefully addressed.
All right. We hope that this issue is, of course, addressed as soon as possible. Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador, for joining us from Washington, D.C. and sharing your thoughts with us. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.